Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the stream. Just sorting out some settings quickly, and then away we go. Greetings, Jeff. I hope you're doing well. If you hear random grumbling, it is not me, it is the dog in my lap. According to him, he's as old as time itself. And he snores like it, too. But the wife is out and about, so he's with me. Like a little baby. Can't be alone. Good morning, Walksmith. I hope you're doing well. Just trying to get the chat chatting. Grumble, grumble. I mean, I used this yesterday, so I don't know why. The chat wouldn't be working. But anyways, while I wait for the chat thing to load. Greetings and salutations, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. If you have any questions, ask away. I'll answer all the ones that are appropriate. Or that I feel are appropriate. If I'm slightly off-center, that's because dog. So, deal with it, is what the dog says. Okay. Interference on the old headphones. That's great. I'll turn this one off while we faff around with this one. Okay, that'll do for now. Yorkie cross something. Maltese, I think. So, a Morkie, I think they called it. It was a rescue dog. Many, many moons ago. Now it's just a fat blob formerly known as a rescue dog. Oh, right. That does seem to be sorted. At least somewhat. We'll give it some time. Try the chat again. Because the funny thing is, you can see the chat. I can't see the chat. Which, you know, I suppose typical for OBS. Anyways, on to the plan. We are going to be doing several chapters, 5 specifically, of The Human from a Dungeon today. And then if my voice is decently up to it afterwards, we'll do a retifos. That is the plan. 6 videos, 16,000 words. And then some chit-chat in between. Good morning, Franny. Good day, should I say, if you're from Australia. Welcome to the live stream. I am open to any questions you may have. I do hold the right to reserve the right to answer them. But don't feel pressured to not ask a question if you are interested. Good morning, Lord Walpus. And James. Nothing wrong with scrambled eggs. Good old scrambled eggs. And if possible, check out the Twitch stream. That needs some love as well. I just don't know how to share it. We do this. Alright, the link to my Twitch stream is pinned to the comments. So if you're interested in Twitch as well, I would be honored if you'd add me on that side. Yes. So the only way this blob walks is if it's being carried. Well, I say that. It's not too bad. This was still when we were in the very Dodge area in South Africa. No, not very Dodge, just a Dodge area where we lived. He was pulled through the fence by a Rottweiler. And in theory, he shouldn't have been able to fit through the fence. Unfortunately, that did some damage to his paws, shoulder, stuff like that. So his arthritis is quite bad. Even though he's not particularly old, I think he's 7. Good morning, Victoria Price. Hope you're doing well. I'm glad that the content helps. I'm always glad to hear when the content helps people through their workday, through travel, through whatever it may be. Anything to make, to fast forward past certain parts of life, I'm quite happy about. My wife baked a cake last night. Had cream in it. She doesn't use all the cream, so I get to have at least a cup of coffee with one cup of coffee with cream in it, which I enjoy, which is this cup of coffee. It was okay. It wasn't too bad with that. What left him traumatized was the transit to Portugal. Whatever happened while he was at the kennels. Yeah. Loud noises. He's very terrified of loud noises. Before he couldn't give a crap about loud noises. Now he's very much goes into a mild panic with loud noises. And he's very clingy, which, kind of understandable. Cake for the win, yes. Yes, cake for the win. So, he trundles around. We try. Well, we don't try. He does, he gets spoiled. Not too much, but just enough. Fair enough. He's always, I'm guessing you mean scritches, not stitches. Because he's definitely not a snitch. Unless you do mean stitches, which I don't think he'll enjoy that. We can embroider a pattern on his back. Oh, an epic loot. Yes, it's a lot of content. It's one of the older series on here. Tunnel Hop. Or epic loot. I just call it epic loot. Most people know what I'm talking about. Oh, we're done 25. We're on to 26. My eyes. Oh, I'm gonna get freaking arg eyes from this. No, thank you. All the same. Link 7318. I did link the URL in the chat, but sometimes that doesn't work. Much appreciated. Alrighty. I think we're as ready as we can be for the first chapter. It's funny, I'm pretty sure that some of these adverts would get me demonetized on YouTube. Some of the ones I've seen. Okay. Good morning, Post-Medic. Hope you're doing well. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? I'm doing a stream. What else am I doing? I'm opening up my narration software. That's what I'm doing. No, it's not AC. It is Human from a Dungeon. 26. No, all good, Postmatic, all good. Oh, Nature of Predators. Epic Loot is something else. Which is Tiddle Hop. This is why I got confused. But yes, Nature of Predators is a seriously long show. Oh, it's actually not that long. I think Tunnel Hop is longer. I mean, the longest series by far. Just no holds barred. It was First Contact. That was 300 hours? No. Yes. No, it was 150 hours. 100 hours. 100 hours of content. Sorry, I was just trying to remember. Because I'm pretty sure... it tops out at like 300 hours for everything. Roughly. And that still pales in comparison to the Wuxia novels and some of those things. Because those are into the thousands and thousands of chapters. There's been a couple, because the author does allow fan work of his universe. So there's several one-shots lurking about, and there's a couple miniseries as well lurking about. I try to avoid fan fiction, but even if it is allowed, because it kind of muddies the water. I think we'll head on to the first chapter. Are we done? He grunts in his sleep. We're good? We're good. Greetings, ladies and melogents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Just before we continue, I do stream 6 days a week on the main channel. If you're interested in that sort of thing, I'd love to see you there. Anyways, on to... Just before we move on, I'd just like to point out that before we move on, I'd like to let it... Just as a quick side note, I stream 6 days a week, GMT-1 on the main channel. If you're interested in that sort of thing, I'd love to see you there. Anyways, on to the story. Nick Smith, adventurer... Oh, I didn't say the chapter. Oh no, the chapter. Chapter 26. Nick Smith, adventurer level 6, human American. Should we ask Imlar if we can take us? Should we ask Imlar if he can take us? I asked my brothers. Nash rubbed his neck and Yoke tapped his chin as if he was thinking. We walked along the busy streets of Kokena in silence for a few moments. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. He did say that he wanted to spend more time with his family, Nash said. He might be better off finding a caravan that's already going to Palisar and just tagging along. Before we see to transportation, we should see if we can get your weapon and armor repaired, Yoke added. If I recall correctly, there are a couple enchanters that might be able to do it quickly. Enchanters? Not a smith? Enchanters use magic. Whoops. Mistakes happen. I don't know. Should we ask... Chapter 26. Nick Smith, adventurer level 6. Oopsie doopsie. Oopsie doopsie. Nick Smith. Nick Smith, adventurer level... Blah, 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 blah. Nick Smith, adventurer level 5, human American. Should we ask Imlar if he... Alrighty. I do apologize. Mistakes happen. If I recall... Enchanters. Enchanters, not smiths. I asked. Enchanters use magic to mend weapons and armor, he explained. It's a fairly quick process compared to doing it manually. Costs more, though, Nash grumbled. That's not that much more expensive, Yoke agreed. It's not that much more expensive, Yoke argued. Plus, it's the fastest way to get your weapons fixed. Come on. Come on. Come on. Yoke led us through the city in search of an enchanter. We passed by several stalls selling various foods and trinkets, buildings advertising various goods and services, and anyways, there were definitely shady gathering spots. Finally, we came to a part of the city that smelled a lot like hot metal. We came to a part of the city that smelled like hot metal. The normal sound of people talking was replaced by the ringing of hammers striking steel and the occasional hiss of rapidly cooling heat. Let's see. Yoke looked around. Ah, there, an enchanter. There, an enchanter. He pointed to a brick building with a sign hanging off the side of it that had some writing and a drawing of a star above an anvil. As we approached the building, I wondered if Ten knew about enchanting. I wondered if Ten knew about enchantments. Hey, Ten, no, he interrupted me. What do you mean, no? I thought angrily. You don't get to ask me questions until you answer mine. How did you stop me from taking control? Ten matched my anger. First of all, I don't know. Second of all, even if I did know, I still wouldn't tell you, because then you'd find a way around what I did and take control of my body away from me again. The conversation had been happening intermittently ever since I woke up from that battle. I don't really remember what I did. All I remember is I suddenly feeling dizzy and thinking to myself that I can't let Ten take control. Can't really remember much after that. Probably a consequence of being thrown like a rag doll. The monster lashed out with one of its claws, as if on instinct. If it hadn't been for my caress, we could have died. We would have died if it weren't for your companions, Ten said. Even if the monster had left you alone after it struck you, I wouldn't have been able to repair that damage without Joni's healing spells. I don't want to die, Nick. Well, neither do I, but I'm not going to get any stronger if you keep talking. But I'm not going to get any stronger if you keep taking control of my body at the first sight of trouble. It is my job to keep us alive, I retorted, not yours. That is simply not true. My mandate is to keep you alive and aid your growth. Obviously, that means letting you fight things you can beat, and even things that you are challenger, and even things that are challenging for you to beat. So I won't be taking over your body as often as you're implying, but you cannot grow if you're dead. So when we run into an enemy that you cannot beat on your own, it only makes sense for me to take control. So when we run into an enemy we cannot beat on your own. So when we run into an enemy you cannot beat on your own, it only makes sense for me to take over and help you beat it. That's the whole reason I have the ability to take control in the first place. Yeah, well, you don't have the ability to take control anymore, so that throws that theory out of the window. And by refusing to answer my questions, you're not fulfilling your mandate of aiding my growth either. As I followed York into the building, I felt a sharp sting between... Good morning, Shadow Aura. Hope you're doing well. As I followed York into the building, I felt a sharp sting behind my eyes that told me I won the argument. Worth it. Behind the counter was a tall, blond man with shining green eyes. I almost thought he was human, but his ears were unnaturally pointed. Just like everyone else I'd seen so far. An elf, probably. Excuse me. An elf. An elf. Just like everyone else. Well, better late than never, as they say. Unnaturally pointed. Just like everyone else I'd seen so far. An elf, probably. Hello. Excuse me. Hello, potential customers. I am Arias. How can I help you today? He asked. We've got some weaponry that needs rapid repair, York answered. A sword and an axe. I'd rather have the other swords repaired than the axe, Nash said. Or maybe all three if the price is right. Well, let's have a look at the weapons then, the elf chuckled. Nash pulled his weapons out and set them on the counter, and I followed suit, adding my cuirass and a fairly adding my cuirass that had a fairly large hole in it. Arias glanced at the items and then at us. Now that I was closer, he looked a lot less human. His skin had a slight green tint, and he didn't have a single pointed tooth in his mouth. It did... Grunt, grunt. It kind of reminded me of videos about the uncanny valley phenomena. He raised an eyebrow as he looked at me over. His eyes lingered over my ears and then met mine. That's a pretty traumatic injury, brother, Arias said. I'm not an elf, I replied. I'm a human. A what? He asked. A paying customer, York interrupted with a smile. Oh, right, good point, the elf laughed nervously. All right, let's have a look here. Arias picked up the remains of each weapon and examined them thoroughly, one after the other. Finally, he looked over my armor and nodded solemnly to himself. Well, the good news is that I can repair them, Arias said, setting the armor back onto the counter. The bad news is that it's going to cost 98 silver and take a few hours. Each? Nash asked suspiciously. The elf laughed. No, total. The 11 blades are the biggest... The elven blades are the biggest chunk of that, coming in 30 silver each. The cutlass I can do for 19, and the fresh... The cutlass... You're reading... Stop shouting at me, damn it. The cutlass I can do for 19. The flesh renderer I can do for 10. Though you should save a lot of money and... Though you should say... Yeah, well, it's not necessarily hydration. It's just... when you wake up in the morning and you got gunk on the vocal cords, it's just that. It's nothing special. It also takes 2 hours to hydrate. I haven't been awake for 2 hours. That's normally why the first one's the roughest. The cutlass I can do for 19. The flesh render I can do for 10. Though you'd save a lot of money on that just by letting me shave it down a bit and redo the serration. The armor's the cheapest because it's going to be the easiest. Hell, it'll almost do most of the work itself. What do you mean? I asked. The enchantment on it is self-repair. Given enough time, it fixes itself. All I've got to do is rush it a bit, and you're good. How long would it take to shave the axe? Nash asked. I've been... Good morning, Anthony. I've been... to shave the axe? Nash asked. I've got a backlog on smithing. It would be at least 2 days. Damn. Gotta have it done today. Well, 98 silver will see them all done in about 2 hours. Why are the elven blades so expensive? I asked. All 3 of them looked at me with raised eyebrows, as if I'd asked why jerky was chewy. I couldn't help but deflate a bit under their gaze. Yes, I don't like water either. So, having to wake up and instantly, really quickly drink 2 liters of water sucks. Under their gaze. Because the crystalline structure of Elvish forgecraft is intricate. Well, proper Elvish forgecraft at least. A knockoff has the same kind of steel you'd find in the Dwarven Journeyman. Find from a Dwarven Journeyman. Orias laughed. These, though, were smithed by a proper Grandmaster with good old-fashioned magicite. Was smithed by a proper Grandmaster with good old-fashioned magicite. Magicite? I asked. Aye, yes, magicite. It's a somewhat rare metal that's notoriously fickle to work with. Adamantium and mithrilite have similar properties, but adamantium requires a much higher temperature, and mithrilite requires actual spellcraft to work with. Magicite, though, is very durable, flexible, and holds a good magic charge. But you have to have the heat on it, just at right. But you have to have the heat on it just right, or it becomes more fragile than glass. When alloyed with steel, it becomes even more durable, he explained. I wouldn't want to meet the monster who would break these blades. I wouldn't want to meet a monster who could break these blades. Yeah, neither did we, Jock chuckled. You got change for gold? Sure do. I'll cover it, Nash said. You hold on to yours. Buy a book to read for the trip or something. He put his gold coin on the counter, and the elf swapped it with 2 silver coins. Pleasure doing business with you. Feel free to have a look around. My apprentice will be coming out front if you want to buy something. Orias smiled wide, demonstrating oddly flat teeth. Or you can just check back in a couple hours. We'll check back. We have to arrange transport to Bolasar. Bolasar? He may want to check with the gnome next door. He's going to be shipping some items to Bolasar for me, the elf said. Excuse me. Sorry. I don't mean to clear my throat into the microphone. Let me guess. The gnome's name is Imla, I asked with a chuckle. Well, yes, but that's not particularly clever of a guess. And a lot of gnomes are named Imla. Huh? The most common gnomish name, and it came from the most... Imla, huh? Vocal cords are a fickle thing at the best of times. But yes. It's like knocking the rust off. It just doesn't want to come off. It is the most common gnomish name, and it came from Imlar Crab, York interjected, a legendary gnomish sorcerer. He invented several spells and defeated several powerful enemies. Yep, Arise said. Anyways, this gnome's name is Imlar Tula. I laughed. I guessed right. He's the one who brought us here. We were thinking he was going to be spending time with his family. Oh, Arias asked. His travels must have been unusually hectic. Regardless, this delivery was agreed upon before he left for the dungeon settlement. It should net him enough to hire someone else to drive the cart, though. Then he'll be able to stay home for more often. Tanelena will be thrilled at first. The other three chuckled, but I didn't get the joke. Instead, something had caught my eye. A glass display that contained a singular item that shouldn't be there. It was a helmet made of what looked like bronze or brass. The reason it shouldn't be here is because I've seen it before. Dozens of times in dozens of different places. Movies, shows, video games, comic books, even online video cosplayers. Even online videos of cosplayers. It was a Spartan helmet. There was no mistaking the iconic design. Red bristles that stuck straight up adorned the crown of the helm, traveling down the back and culminating into a ponytail. The eye holes were rounder than I remember them being, but the nose guard without a mouth covering the left side. But the nose guard without a mouth covering left little doubt as to where the design had come from. As I looked into the face of the helm, I felt a pull. I want nothing more than to put it on and find my way to my goals. It'll protect me as I cleave through my enemies on my way back to Cass. The eyes on the helmet seemed to burn into my own, and for a moment I imagined her playful and I'm stifling a yawn. A lot more difficult than it seems. Into my own. And for a moment I imagined her playfully taking the helmet off me and kissing me. I was happy. She was happy. And the helmet was happy for us. A tear ran from one of my eyes. Careful, Arias said, snapping me out of it. I realized that I'd been clenching my fist so hard that my nails had dug into my skin. I took a deep breath and let out a sigh. I took a deep breath and let it out with a sigh. I wiped my face and looked at the elf. I wiped my face and looked at the elf. How much? I asked. You sure? Yes. Wait. How much? How much? I asked. You sure? Yes. Wait, Nash said. What's going on? It would appear that Ares has chosen a new champion, Arias answered. Ares? The question hung in my throat. Yes, the helmet's name, named after a god of war from another world, according to the annuals that brought it to this one. It chooses a champion and protects them until they pick a fight they cannot win. Then it escorts their souls to the afterlife and waits for another champion, he explained. At least, that's how the legends go. In practice, it's a heavily enchanted helmet that won't activate its enchantments for just anyone. I gave it around because I like how it looks, and it's an interesting story to tell potential customers. Ares, the ancient Greek god of war and courage. How did the annuals know about that? Have they been to my world? Or maybe the whole thing is made up. But who here would know of Ares? Another human, maybe. What kind of enchantment does it have? York asked, oblivious to my concerns. It has basic protection against the elements, piercing resistance, and the kinetic intensifier in its metal. The brush has a The brush is a cleanliness enhancer and another, more unique enchantment. If the annuals really did bring the helmet here, were they also the ones that enchanted it? Or did it come from another version of my world, one with magic and stuff? Kinetic intensifier in a helmet. You don't usually see those on anything other than hammers, Nash commented. What's the unique enchantment do? York asked. I'm not 100% sure. It's conditional and the script is, confusing. I assume that it'll only take effect if worn by someone that chooses. But I can't tell you exactly what will happen. Just that it is something Just that it is something to do with its existence, Arias said. Do you know where we can find annuals? I asked. The three looked at me curiously. It occurred to me that my question had come out of nowhere to them. I don't know, Arias stammered. They haven't left heaven since the Cataclysm Wars, I think, and nobody knows how to get to heaven. Why do you ask? Why do you ask? York asked. Haven, yes, true. And nobody knows how to get to heaven. I don't know, Arias stammered. They haven't left Haven since the Cataclysm Wars, I think, and nobody knows how to get to Haven. Why do you ask? York asked. The annuals might know my home, and how I can get back. Really? Nash raised an eyebrow. Fine then. How much for the helmet? Well, normally it wouldn't be for sale, but, well, Arias pursed his lips thoughtfully. I'll let it go for 50 silver if the human puts it on here. I'd love to see what the unique enchantment does. Deal, I said. End of chapter. A bit of a rough start, but I'm sure we'll pick up steam. Do you have anything to say? He says he's snoring. Now he's ignoring me. Hydration. I hate hydration. Dog. I've got a dog, a KO on my lap. But yes, cats are also great at ignoring people. The dog's ignoring me because he's KO. Yes, he does want cake. He's dying of starvation because he didn't get any cake. Now I've got the yawns. Bad yawns. Oh yeah, but don't worry. It gets sorted out soon enough. Well, yes, the cake is a lie because it doesn't exist anymore. It's in my tummy. Yes, hiding in the most appropriate place. Yarg! I think I would have broken fingers if I stole too much cake. My wife can get mean like that. Well, I suppose. She's good at defending. Yep, I actually did know that. All the variations of Marcus. Marcus, Marquis. What's the other one? There's another one. Marco. That was the other one. They're all derived from the same name, which all comes from Mars. The entomology of names is interesting. Well, not interesting enough to make it a hobby. Interesting is like, that's cool. And then move on with life. Defender of cake, yes. Yes, she is. Polo, indeed. Indeed. That is I think, a wholly American game, Marco Polo. Never played it as a kid. Didn't even know it existed. Well, I mean, surnames, a lot of them come from, like, maker of X, smither of X, doer of stuff. First names are a bit more varied. In my opinion. Are we settled? His eyes are open, so it can't be snoring. But it is very comfortable. Sometimes I think it's snoring. It thinks it's a cat, and that snoring is its equivalent of purring. And if that's the case, I purr every night. Loudly. Loudly. Purring doggo, yes. Purring doggo needs a bath. It's just been too cold over the last couple of days. Too wet as well. Which is ironic for a bath, but... my assistant today. Okay. He's gotten into this habit of just having the most massive size for such a small dog. It was like... You'd swear that he'd seen some shit. And he's just sighing for the whole world. That's funny. I don't have to do anything. My profession in no way relates to my surname. Or my first name. Well, maybe a little bit my first name, but definitely not my surname. My surname would have to, like, relate to maker of noise. Blower of cover. Sneaker of knot. You know, something like that. Loudest prick you leave behind before you go on a hunt. You know, simple surnames. Okay, on to the next chapter. Hopefully this one goes a bit smoother. I am out of water, but I am not out of coffee. But I will need a refill after this chapter. No, that's my middle name. I got a lot of middle names. My parents got carried away. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. The microphone. Banger of pots. Yes. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration in the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. Just a quick note that I do stream 6 days a week on the main channel, GMT-1 at 9 a.m. If you're interested in sort of the... If you're interested in that sort of thing, I would love to see you there. Anyways, on to the story. Chapter 27. Imlaw Tula, Adventurer Level NA, Gnome Kokenian. So you don't have enough to hire a driver for this delivery? It has to be you, Telena asked, bouncing our baby boy, Igran, on her arm. The boy was named after my wife's father, who had been my uncle's best friend and taught me everything he knew about being a merchant. These lessons were how Telena and I met. She's the reason that I am a firm believer in love at first sight. Her father was less than thrilled to hear about our courtship at first, but he came around and endorsed our wedding. He never hesitated to offer aid to us in our family group. He never hesitated to offer aid to us as our family grew, right up until his death just a week before Igran was born. I wrapped my arms around my wife and son and squeezed him tight. Igran, the little scamp, grabbed my ear and tried to put it in his mouth. I could hire a driver, but I wouldn't be able to hire carts for them, I smiled sadly as I twisted my ear off my boy's grasp. That wouldn't be fair, especially with all that's going on recently. All that's going on recently. What a dull way to describe all the happenings in recent times. Rumor has it that the Drow are planning to start attacking again. There's been a rock slide and something that's not shut down. There's been a rock slide, or something, that shut down the adventurer's path to Polisar. And there's been reports of disappearances on the civilian path. I'm definitely going to need... I'm definitely going to need to hire guards. But what if you run into another Nehilim? My darling, I'd rather pay guards to run into a Nehilim myself than hire an unguarded driver to have them run the... Then hire an unguarded driver to have them run into it for me. I kissed her on the cheek and put a hand on her shoulder. I'll make sure to hire the toughest of guards, and this will be the last time that I have to do a delivery myself. The original plan had been to hire both a driver and guards for this job. If the giant rats hadn't killed my Nasses and destroyed everything but the metal I was transporting, I'd have been able to stay home with my family and let the business take care of itself for a bit. Maybe even indefinitely. I'm glad that I hadn't had this conversation with Telena last time. Fate would have made a liar of me. It had to be better. It had better be. I don't know if I can take many more sleepless nights. I thought it was bad just having to worry about our Joel. I thought it was bad just having to worry about Junior, but at least he's an actual adventurer, she sighed. Igran added, matching his mother's serious expression. I'm sorry, my sweet. At least I won't be fighting any of the monsters, though. I'm not as brave as our son. I smiled and handed Ingrid his teething toy. As a proper coward, I simply wouldn't be able to. Sure, dog. Toy. As a proper coward, it simply wouldn't do to be charging headlong into danger. So don't worry too much, okay? A bell rang that indicated the shop in front of the house had a visitor, hopefully a customer. I kissed my wife's forehead and patted her free arm. I'll be fine, I said. I hope so. I smiled at her and went to see our potential customers. I walked through the warehouse entrance, sighing as I looked upon all the empty shelves. The ones that did contain goods weren't exactly full either. That would change soon. Just one more delivery and things would get back on track. I walked through a flap that led into my shop and paused as I saw who my customers were. Hi, Imlaw, Nick grinned at me. Pew. Hi, Imla. Nick grinned at me as his oddly shaped teeth. Hi. Okay. Are we comfortable? Are we shifted? Are these happy grunts? Okay. It's back to sleep. And snoring. I don't know whether you can hear that. I don't think you can hear that. Anyways. Saw who my customers were. Hi, Imla. Nick grinned at me with his oddly shaped teeth. Hello, Nick, I said. I'm happy that you were able to find my little shop. Did you come to tell me how things went with the High Chief? In a way, York chuckled, browsing my written goods. I need a ride to Balasar, Nash grunted, his arms crossed. The elf next door said that you were going there to make a delivery for him. Arias, well, yes, I am going to be making a delivery for him. Going to be a tight fit if I have to hire more guards, though, I said with a slight grin. I don't mind paying. I don't mind working for transportation. How much are you paying? Will 50 coppers each do the trick? Chopping wood. I don't mind working for transportation. How much are you paying? Will 50 coppers each do the trick? I think 75 would be more appropriate. You seem to be a monster magnet. Come now, brother, York interjected. It simply cannot be his fault that every time we've seen him, we've also seen monsters. It's also a boon that we're getting paid to travel to where we need to go. How about 60, I asked. Nash sighed and proceeded to perform several theatrics that I'd seen dozens of times before, rubbing his chin, scratching his neck, tapping his foot, all the while pretending to think about the deal I'd just offered. Of course, he was actually hoping that I'd sweeten the deal a bit. Might as well. It'd still be less expensive than hiring guards from the guild. Plus meals, I added. Within reason, of course. 3 hots a day. 1 hot, 2 colds. You prefer hot dinner or breakfast? Dinner. All right, 60 coppers each, and you buy the jerky and stew, Nash said, offering a hand. Deal. I shook his hand. Could I get some meals that have a mixture of meat and veg in them? Nick asked. Stew has proso chunks in it. Stew has proso trunks in it, Nash. Stew has proso trunks in it, Nash answered. That's a vegetable, technically. It's actually a starchy tuber, York added. It's known to help with cramping of... It's known to help with cramping if prepared properly. Putting it in a stew isn't one of the ways to prepare it as an anti-cramping tonic, though. I remember catching him pausing that Nick was able to eat both meat and vegetables, but I'd been busy at the time and hadn't given him much thought. The shape of his teeth suddenly came to mind, and it all clicked into place. I can help with this. I usually bring extra fruit and veg bars, I said. I'll share the excess with you. Thanks, Nick said with another grin. York walked over to my counter and set down a well-worn tome. York walked over to my counter and set down a well-worn tome that had been collecting dust on my shelf for a few months. I raised an eyebrow at him. How much for this one? He asked. The musings. The musings of Grelv. You can take it, I chuckled. If it weren't for you, I'd say that there wasn't a soul in the city that cares anything about an imp's opinion on the Fae. A what? Nick asked. An imp, York explained. An imp, York explained. A small, typically nomadic race that has a bad reputation. My interest is less in the subject matter of the book and more in the fact that an imp wrote it. They aren't known to be fond of writing. Nothing makes that more apparent than the musings of Grelv, I laughed. Why do they have a bad reputation? Because they've got plenty of bad apples that don't bother sorting out. Because they have got plenty of bad apples they don't bother sorting out, Nash answered the boy. Nash answered the boy with a grunt. They're temporarily settled near a village or town, and once there's been a few thefts, assaults, and murders, they run instead of letting the culprit face justice. It can't be all of them, though, Nick argued. Right. Maybe not, York said. You rarely see them in these parts, yet even we've heard the stories, though. Unfortunately, that means there's likely some truth to them. York put the book in his pack, settled his stuff to the nook of his arm, and brushed the dust from his hands. The conversation got me thinking about the reputation that gnomes used to have in these parts. I grew up with people saying that gnomes were willing to sell their children for copper if they needed one to screw someone over. That, of course, isn't true for most gnomes. And for every gnome that it is true for, there's an elf or good dwarf that it's also true for. We gave rise to this generalization. What gave rise to this generalization was that most of the gnomes in Kokena were merchants of some variety. The reason for that is because most of the gnomes here come from migrants, and being a merchant was the best way for an immigrant to make a living. There's plenty of gnomes in Calcutta that aren't merchants, and it's almost impossible to find a gnomish merchant in Hinkran. The unfortunate reality of this generalization is that people automatically assume that gnomes are good at business, and are more than willing to trust gnomes that they shouldn't trust when it comes to matters of business. A few years ago, one of the great chiefs appointed a gnome as a treasurer. This particular gnome was a blowhard and didn't have a head for any sort of business. This particular gnome was a blowhard who didn't have a head for any sort of business, let alone civic economics. Let alone civic economics. Economics. Let alone civic economics. The gnome in question gravely disrupted the economy of the city. It got so bad that he and several of the innocent gnomes were lynched before the great chief's guards were able to put a stop to things. The mob of angry Mer genuinely believed that... The mob of angry Mer genuinely believed that all the gnomes in the city, who were also negatively impacted by the bad economy, were somehow involved in a conspiracy to bring the city down. Even after everything settled down, there were attacks on caravans and businesses that were owned by gnomes for years afterwards. It must be terrible to live in a place where your neighbors hate you through no fault of your own. I'd like to believe that the Kokena's different, but... When you're going to be ready to leave? When are you going to be ready to leave? Nash asked. The cards are all packed, but I need to pick up some provisions for the Adventurers Guild. The cards are all packed, but I need to pick up some provisions from the Adventurers Guild, I answered. Just as well. We should get Nick's level reassessed, York said. Really? Why? Nick asked. Grunt, grunt, snore, snore, grunt, grunt, snore, snore. Because you learned some new skills in our adventures thus far, York grinned. Plus I'm curious as to how 10 impacts your level. I'm willing to bet that you're at least level 6. No way. Sure, he learned a couple of skills. Well, that doesn't mean he went up a level, Nash said, shaking his head. Right, I interrupted. Well, the cards are back. Well, right. It's gone numb. Dog, my leg has gone numb because of you. Yep, no shit's given. Dead. Right, I interrupted. Well, the carts are out back. Go ahead and load up. I'll be with you shortly. The three nodded and left out of the front of the shop, and I exited through the back flap back into the warehouse. As I entered my home, my wife looked up at me from the kitchen table. She must have set Igran down to play in his room. Customers? She asked. Nope, I answered. Those were the people that saved my butt when I was on the road. Turns out they also need to go to Balasar, so I hired them as guards. On the cheap, of course. Telena laughed. Always finding a way to save some coin. You sure this is going to turn out all right? I shrugged. It has to. And it's awake. Oh no, it's awake. The Kraken has awoken. It has to. And contractually obliged. Even if I weren't, by the time another opportunity like this came along, we'd be starving. And I still have to go. I know, she sighed. I'm just worried I don't want to lose you. Telena hadn't always been like this. When I initially went on the delivery to Nluva, she'd see me off with a smile, confident in my return. Something changed when I got home days later. Then I should. Something changed when I got home days later than I should have, and told her about the giant rats and the Nehilim. She's been fretting over me ever since. If it were anyone else, I would be annoyed. But with Telena, I couldn't feel anything except love. I hate to see her worried, but I'd hate it more to see her starving. I love her more than anything, and I'd give anything to see her happy and well. I'll do everything in my power to make certain that you don't, darling. I brushed her hair out of her face and kissed her. I've got to go. I know. She pulled me into a tight hug. I returned the embrace, enjoying the flowery scent of her hair and the feel of her warm breath on my chest. I silently wished that I had become someone's apprentice instead of starting my own business. Some job that would just require me to work some hours and come home to her, safe and sound. Making just enough to keep a roof over our heads and food in our bellies. What more do I need when I've got her by my side? Unfortunately, that was a pipe dream. I'm too old to be an apprentice now, and I don't have any non-mercantile skills that would let me start over fresh. The only way to keep my family housed, clothed, and fed is to revitalize my business, and the only way to do that is to leave Telena behind for a time and risk my life on the open road. I love you, more than anything, I whispered to her. I love you more than that, she whispered back. I gave her another squeeze and kissed her again. I'll be back. I'll be back. Just randomly, out of nowhere, she turns and, I'll be back. Freaked me the hell out. End of chapter. Well, they've said numerous times that the level doesn't do anything. It just represents how strong you are. So it doesn't really matter that much. It's just a good way of identifying roughly how strong you are. And it's based off of skills rather than your ability to use skills because I can't measure it. But now, my armpit is snoring. Yep, there we go. No, sorry, I moved. My bad. Okay, I need my help. There we go. We good? All right. Just taking a bit of a relax. I do need to go get some more coffee. I will be back shortly. Turn the music up a little bit, and then I'll give you to the empty chair. Be right back. Alrighty, back with coffee and more water. No dog, it wandered off. But I'm sure it'll make its way this way again. Ooh, a lot of people appeared when I walked away. Hello, hello. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the stream. If you got any questions, shoot them off. I'll answer them as I can. But anyways, we'll move on to the next chapter. After I get my heart rate under control. I say that like I'm super unfit, which I mostly am. But I just walked up 2 flights of stairs, so. Take a moment to let the body relax a little bit. Yawn, that's always a good sign. I forgot to even post this on all my social. Very bad at social media. I don't actually like social media too much. Not that I don't like being social-ish. But I do not like social media. YouTube is an entertainment platform in my mind. But then I suppose TikTok is not, I don't know. Yeah. Unfortunately, when you play the YouTube game, you got to play the social media game. I mean, Discord. I'm on 4 Discord servers. One of them is mine. The other one is HFY. And the other one is Humans of Space Hawks. But other than that, what's the full server? Or, 3. Oh, and First Contact. I'm part of the server there, for some reason. Alrighty, I think we'll move on to a big yawn. That's apparently what we're moving on to. And the next chapter. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of the Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 28. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 5, Human American. We waited for a few minutes in the back of the cart before Imla finally... Oh, the water's fighting back. We waited for a few minutes in the back of the cart before Imla finally came out of the back door from his house. We waited for a few minutes in the back of the cart before Imla finally came out. We waited for a few minutes in the back of the cart before Imla finally came out to the back door of his house. It was an interesting building, a shop attached to the side of his house. The only door on the front I'd seen was for the shop, so maybe this was the front door of the house. So maybe this was the front door of his house. That makes sense if he normally parks his carts back here. The harnesses were tied to the carts and attached to a stake. They didn't react at all when we had approached, but I get the feeling that if we tried to pet them, we'd regret it immediately. There was a stable next to the back of the shop, which must be where they sleep. They looked a lot better than the stables I'd seen back on Earth, like someone paid a lot of money for its construction. Imla untied the reins from the stake and patted each harness on the head. "Are you good?" Nash asked, referring to the unexpected wait. "Yeah, saying goodbye to the missus," Imla answered as he climbed into the driver's seat. "She's justifiably worried about my health." "I wouldn't say justifiably," Nash chuckled. "We've got 3 tough guards to watch your back." "True enough. But as you said before, I'm somewhat of a monster magnet," Imla chuckled. "No matter how tough my guards are, there's a chance that something might hit me from out of nowhere." "Yeah, but York knows how to heal, so it'll work out." "Assuming it doesn't kill him immediately," York added. Assuming it doesn't kill him immediately, York added. "Magic can heal, but it can't bring back the dead. Well, not as they were at any rate." Speaking of the dead, I said, "if vampires exist, what about zombies and other stuff like that?" As the cart began moving, York and Nash stared at me. I suppose it hadn't occurred to them that I was ignorant of such things. Nash sighed, but York grinned, likely excited by his chance to give a lecture. "Shambling corpses, ghouls, and most other monsters that relate to the death of mortals are all magical beings that have been corrupted by death in one way or another. There is magic to create such fiends, but thankfully it's relatively rare and very looked down upon," York explained. "If Nash were to die and I raise again as a zombie, I wouldn't hesitate to destroy his fetid corpse. Do you know why?" "Because it wouldn't be Nash anymore," I guessed. "Correct," he said gleefully. "And Nash would have passed on to whatever awaits in the afterlife. What would then be inhabiting his corpse would be nothing more than a corrupted magical being, one that, presumably, I've never met, and as such feel no attachment to." "What sort of magical being would do that?" What sort of magical being would that be?" "There are too many different magical beings to classify them all, and most of them have the ability to possess dead flesh. Both fairies and the Fae, for instance, are able to do so. When a fairy possesses a corpse, it becomes a zombie. When a Fae possesses one, it becomes a ghoul. However, this doesn't mean that every zombie used to be a fairy and every ghoul used to be a Fae." "What is a ghoul exactly?" I asked. "Where I come from, they're creatures that hang out in graveyards and eat the rotting flesh from corpses." "That's almost the exact opposite of what ghoul is here," York laughed. Ghouls are mutated corpses that crave the flesh of the living like a zombie does, but are much better equipped to get it than a zombie is. Faster, smarter, and much stronger. Thankfully, they hunt solos most of the time, and do so by ambushing prey. Thankfully, they hunt solo most of the time, and do so by ambushing those who wander too far from safety of numbers. Ghouls don't actually need to eat, so they're very patient pests, Nash added. How do you kill one? The corrupted magical being that is reanimating the corpse resides in the brain and controls its functions with magic. Look, York said. As such, the only way to terminate an undead is decapitation, or to apply extreme cerebral trauma. Fire would technically work, but only because it performs the latter method of extermination. And vampires? Vampirism is a tricky one, technically. When a mer is turned into a vampire, their magical core is merged with a corrupted magical being, and they in turn become a new type of magical being. By far and large, they retain their identity and memories, as well as the use and any skills they possessed while they were alive. By far and large, they retain their identity and memories, as well as the use of any and all skills they possessed while they were alive. York hesitated. If Nash were to rise again as a vampire, I would hesitate to end him. Or re-end him, I suppose. Why is that? Vampires don't have to be evil. Why is that? Vampires don't have to be evil, Nash said. There's been tales of vampire heroes who fought alongside mortals to put an end to those who would destroy life as we know it. Which makes the choices that most vampires decide upon all the more tragic, York added. There is a great deal of trauma that goes into becoming a vampire, and the immediate surge in power afterwards is too much for most minds to bear. Wanting others to join you in suffering is a very common trait amongst mortals, and vampires are in a rather unique position to accomplish exactly that. It doesn't help that shitheads vamps purposely recruit other shitheads, Nash grumbled. Societal leeches becoming literal leeches is all that is. Do you kill them by decapitating them? I asked. Nash and York shared a look. I am afraid it's not that simple as that. I am afraid that it's not as simple as that, York explained. Since they have become magical beings, they're not limited to their flesh like we are. One must bind them to the flesh through spellcraft or by divine grace, and then entirely destroy their body. Decapitation will help in that regard, but the entire body must be destroyed, or the head will simply grow back, or the body will grow back from the head. They have insane regeneration abilities, especially if they've recently fed, Nash added. Even if you chop them up into little bits, and you can still regrow their flesh from one of those bits, it's best to bind them, lob off the head, and incinerate the immediate area entirely. Do they actually drink people's blood? I asked. Like, can't they drink animal blood? No, they have to drink the blood of mortals. It's the only thing that will provide them sustenance. They can pretend to be immortal by eating and drinking normal food, but they pass that food in the way that one would expect of a mortal. But they slowly starve unless they drink the blood of mortals, York said. The aforementioned vampiric heroes had people willingly give them blood, usually a lover or a friend, and didn't take more than they absolutely needed. How do you know? How do you know a lot, well? How do you lot know so much about vampires? Imla asked, sounding a little unnerved. It's an interesting subject, Nash replied defensively. Might have to fight one someday. Wasn't all that long ago that they ruled the kingdom of night, you know. A few generations now, anyways. I learned most of what I know from the works of Imla the Grand's tomes on the subject, York chuckled. Ah, Imla the Grand. Now that's an interesting subject, Imla said. Didn't know he knew a lot about vampires, though. Towards the end of his life, he became a little obsessed with immortality, as most magic wielders do, York explained. The experiments he did and captured vampires were more than a little disturbing. I I don't want to hear any of that then, Imlar interrupted. I'd rather be mental. I'd rather the mental image I have of my namesake remained unsullied, if you don't mind. I don't mind at all, York chuckled. Hey, 10, are we on speaking terms again? I thought to my AI companion. What do you want? It replied curtly. Do you think that a vampire would be able to turn me into one? Definitely not. Your magical core is artificial, and as such cannot be corrupted by outside influences like a natural magic core can. Your blood also has several differences from the blood of Mer, so it's not even clear whether it would be utilized as a source of substance. So it's not even clear whether it would be utilized. So it's not even clear if it could be used. So it's not even clear whether it could be utilized as a source of sustenance by a vampire. So they wouldn't even be able to drink my blood. There isn't anything about your blood that would physically prevent them from ingesting it. It's unknown whether it would It's unknown whether it would grant sustenance to a vampire, though. I suppose it would either be disgusting or a delicacy. Before I could ask 10 anything further, the cart stopped in front of the very impressive building. The cart stopped in front of a very impressive building. Its construction was primarily polished stone that had a dark grey coloration, with wooden details and pillars holding up the roof. The wood had a red tinge to it and stood out against the grey walls. Nash and Yook respectfully hopped and Nash and Yook respectfully hopped and climbed out of the cart when Imlar and I soon followed. Nash and Yook respectively hopped out and climbed out of the cart. Nash and Yook respectfully hopped and climbed out of the cart, with Imlar and I soon following. As we approached the building, I noticed sights. As we approached the building, I noticed slight seams in the stonework, as if they had polished massive chunks of stone and stacked them on top of each other. Nash pushed open one of the massive double doors and gestured for us to enter, which we did. I nodded a thank you at him as I passed, to which he grunted. It was unclear whether he was annoyed or appreciative. I'm going to the quartermaster's dugout, Imlark said. Meet me there if you're done first. Understood, replied York. York began to approach the front desk, and we followed him. Nash leaned up against the counter as an elven woman wearing a long-sleeved shirt and a vest appeared from the door in the back. Hello there. How can I help you today? She asked with a smile. Her smile nearly faltered when she saw me, but her professionalism kicked in. It was obvious that she wanted to ask about me, but decided against it. We would like to get each level tested, Nash gestured at me. Certainly, just a moment. She reached under the counter and pulled out an intricately carved wooden box, which she then opened. She took a machine that looked like the one from the Noluvian Adventurers Guild and set it on the counter. A shiny black box with 6 legs. Good morning, Mackenzie. Hope you're doing well. A shiny black box with 6 legs made of different metals, gold, silver, copper, and I couldn't tell what the other 3 were. One was probably platinum, and the other 2 were strange. One had a deep blue coloration, and the other had a light pink color to it. Your guild card, please, she smiled. I have his guild card right here, York said as he passed her my card. He'd held on to it for me while I had my physical and had forgotten to ask for it back. Just as well. They might fall out of my pocket during a fight or something. The elf plugged a card into the slot that was facing us and put her fingers in the holes in the side of the box. The elf plugged a card into the slot that was facing us and put her fingers into some holes on her side of the box. A bright blue light shone from the top of the box and gathered itself into a perfect square. Green lights soon followed, creating a handprint as well as characters that I couldn't read on the blue square. The blue and green lights hardened into something that looked a lot like stained glass. The elf removed her fingers from the box and inserted some papers where her hand had been. Please place your hand on the handprint until you feel a slight electric shock, she smiled. Slight electric shock, my ass. When Nima had said that to me, I'd expected something like a static shock. What actually happened was a jolt of electricity shoving it my way. What actually happened was a jolt of electricity shoving its way through my hand and up my arm. I grit my teeth and placed my hand firmly on the damned print. My hand started shaking in anticipation of the shock, but it didn't come. I took a deep breath and managed to hold my hand still, pressing it into the print. I felt a slight tingle traveling up my arm, but still couldn't tell if it was electricity or just my nerves, traumatized by my previous experience. I opened my mouth to ask what it was. I opened my mouth to ask about it when it happened. Fuck! I shouted as a bolt of electricity shot out my elbow and arced to the floor. York and Nash and the elf all leapt back as I sank to my knees, holding my now injured arm. What the hell was that? Nick shouted. I don't know, the elf stammered. I've never seen it do that before. Are you all right, Nick? York asked, leaning down to check on me. That freaking hurt, I said as I squeezed my eyes shut to prevent tears from making an appearance. I felt something odd in my mind. It wasn't a sound, but a sort of feeling, one that you get when you're giggling maniacally. It took me a second to realize what it was. Was that you? I asked Ten, trying very hard to make my inner dialogue sound angry. No, but I didn't stop it, Ten continued laughing. Serves you right. That could have killed me. Not at that voltage, I explained. It wasn't even close to lethal. Painful, absolutely. But since you want to be independent... But since you want to be independent, from now on I'll just stop the things from killing you. You can figure out how to deal with pain yourself. I was getting really tired of this, but I knew better than to blow up at it. That would just make it angrier, and it wasn't like Ten didn't have many other ways to make my life miserable. Instead, I opted for diplomacy. Look, Ten, I'm sorry. I should have talked things out with you before the fight happened. You're damn right you should have, Ten interrupted. I know it was frightening, and my unexpected resistance must have been absolutely rare. And my unexpected resistance must have absolutely made it even more so, I continued. I understand that you're just stuck with me as I am stuck with you, and it was stubborn and foolish of me not to take that into account. Correct. Neither of us asked for the situation, and I shouldn't treat you like you're to blame. I'm sorry. Yoke gently grabbed my uninjured arm and pulled me to my feet. Apology accepted, you did it. Apology accepted. Apology accepted, Ten said. The reason that happened is because the stats reader takes some of your mana to determine your current skills and spells, and then returns it. However, your new incorporeal helmet is passively boosting your mana output. The excess energy was The excess energy was the return. How do I keep it from happening every time? I asked. You don't need to. I can stop it from happening by tightening your channels so the flow is closer to your norm. However, learning to control your mana flow should... However, learning to control your mana flow better wouldn't hurt. Are you okay? The elf asked. Yeah, sorry about that. I got a new enchanted helmet, and it increased my mana flow without my knowledge, I answered. Is the extra mana going to interfere with the results of the stats reader? I quickly asked Ten. No. It only takes the mana to determine your skills and spells. The amount of mana you have is determined separately by Kuragard through unknown means. Helmet? She asked, looking at my hair. This, Nash said, as he swung a fist at my head. I didn't even get the chance to duck before Ares suddenly appeared on my head and rang like a bell as Nash's fist struck it. I reeled back, and Nash sucked in a breath as he waved his now injured hand. I found my footing and tried to shake the ringing out of my head as York chuckled. Serves you right, Nash, he said, sucker punching a seemingly defenseless child. Shame on you. I was just a demonstration of the helmet's ability to appear when its wearer is in danger, Nash. Nash massaged his hand. I hardly call it a sucker punch. I felt my head and found that Ares had disappeared. I felt my head and found that Ares had disappeared once again. It occurred to me that I have no way to remove the helmet if it keeps disappearing on me like this. I felt a bit of panic before I realized that since I don't feel the helmet on my head until it's needed, there's really no reason for me to have to take it off. Still, I wish I'd known that it would be a permanent addition when I'd first tried it on. But right, the elf said, remembering her professionalism. Well, here are the results. She handed my guild card back to me, and I looked at it. Some of the characters have changed, but I still had no idea what it said. Yook looked over my shoulder and let out a low whistle. I handed the card to him as Nash raised an eyebrow. What's it say? He said. Level 10, Yook said with an uncharacteristically deadpan tone. What? Nash shouted. No fucking way. Gotcha, Yook started laughing. He's level 7. God, you should see your face. You're not funny, Nash said, utterly failing to convince our brother, who continued to laugh uproariously. 2 levels. I got a few new skills and practiced my fighting a bit, but I was under the impression that levels were hard to attain. What happened? Nash noticed my confusion. Probably something to do with 10. Probably something to do with 10, he said, pushing me to the side. Move over. I want to test mine. Oh, certainly, the elven lady said. Guild card, please. Nash looked at Yook, who was doubled over, with tears in his eyes. After a few seconds of this, Nash cleared his throat. While continuing to laugh, Yook reached into his robe, produced another metal card, and handed it to Nash. Nash turned back to the elf and gave her the card. 10. Why did I jump up 2 levels? I asked while Nash put his hand on the handprint. The level system has a lot of difficulty to account for variables. However, once I was activated, I took the liberty of optimizing your magic core, which has both made it easier for you to cast spells and increase your base mana. This, combined with the new skills you've gained, is likely the reason. I'm afraid I can't read, and my normal narrator is currently indisposed, Nash. Yeah. Give me a second. Wife's calling. Sorry about that. Back. All right. Nash. Oh yeah, yeah. It's just she's out and about and wanted to ask me something. Exposed, Nash. Exposed. No problems, no emergencies or anything. I'm afraid I can't read, but I'm afraid I can't read, and my normal narrator is currently indisposed, Ash said, gesturing to York, who was still hunched over and laughing. Could you tell me my level? Certainly. You're level 9, she smiled. Congratulations. Thank you so much, Nash smirked at me. York coughed a bit to calm his laughing fit. Yes, congratulations, brother. One level closer to marrying Nima. That's, Nash said, turning a slightly darker green. Blushing? That's not the point. I was trying to point out that I learned some new skills, too. I know, York chuckled. Let's go see Imla to get our weapons. We need to hit the road. What new skills did you learn, Nash? I asked as we walked towards the quartermaster dugout. He turned to make eye contact with me and gave me the type of grin that can only be described as evil. Oh, you say. End of chapter. Alrighty. Coffee. So, just a general thing. After this chapter, when I was pre-reading this and deciding whether I wanted to read the story, this is the chapter which made me think, okay, we can do this. Because now he's got an AI. In most other stories, now he's an unstoppable force. The AI is going to help with everything. He's just going to steamroll across everything. But in actuality, it helped, but it didn't make him OP. So, and then Nash gaining a level as well just shows that, he's going quickly, but not ridiculously quickly. That he's not going to face roll everything. So I prefer stories where it's not face rolling over everything. It's kind of where I decided that, okay, maybe this is a good story for us to read. Yes, the wife was calling to find out what type of cake the dog wanted. Now, that is pretty close to the actual truth. Chapter. No, it's not. But we will pretend it is. We still got yesterday's cake to finish. It's just one of the going through the re-TFOS. It's one that's popping up. So when I go through my old videos to find the stuff to narrate, to redo for the re-TFOS, it kept popping up. Same as Humans Are Weird. Don't know whether I'm going to do it. We did these, which meant I had to work 7 days a week. So I'm probably going to stop doing that and take Saturday off. Just give my voice a bit of a break. And then if, by some chance, we end up with some extra time during the week, we can either do these or more of these. Really depends. So, if I remember correctly, the Pretty Little Death Wilders chapters were quite long, so I don't think we'll be doing them. but I'll have to double check. It's just on the list so that I remember. It's one of those. I need to go check that out and then just completely forget to go check that out. And every time I read it, I'm like, yeah, I'll check it after the stream or after this narration or... You know. One of those things. Okay. Because as far as I know, they also didn't have, like, next chapter, previous chapter links. So I have to go physically go check each chapter. Go through the author's postings. The human from a dungeon. Okay, on to the next chapter. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 29. Master General Kyrian. Kirain. Yeah, we'll go with Kirain. Master General Kirain Yith. Adventurer level NA. Half-breed drow Belushinian. Are the preparations complete, spindly one? The crow was perched upon the helmet of my armor, and its eyes glowed a faint red as the message burned into my mind. My fury enveloped me. How dare it refer to me as spindly? This entire plan depends entirely upon me. On the other hand, though, my plans depend upon them as well. I carefully hid my bile and rage at the disrespect as I formalized my response. The preparations are moving forward according to the schedule. I grow impatient. We grow impatient. The filth one must be destroyed, and our lands must be returned. I couldn't help but sigh. How can one live for thousands of years and still be as impatient as a whining pup? Do elder vampires regress into childhood as they age? Thinking on it, the older people seem to get less mature as they seem to act. Thinking on it, the older people seem to get the less mature they seem to act. Even members of nobility are no exception. Perhaps maturity follows some sort of bell curve. There is nothing that can be done from your impatience. There is nothing that can be done for your impatience, with the exception of There is nothing that can be done for your impatience, with the exception of the expert application of your own willpower. A shriek blasted in my mind that would have given me a start had I not been fully expecting it. The faint glow of the crow's eyes turned bright as they bored into mine. I met those eyes without blinking, staring down the challenge issued. The vampire controlling the crow knew there was nothing that they could do against me. Soon enough, the coloration faded entirely, and I was left glaring at a very confused Corvid. Crows are strange birds. In many ways, they seem to be dumber than the birds that they are natural to this world. In many ways, they seem to be dumber than birds that are natural to this world, but in some certain specific ways, they are very intelligent. This crow, for instance, knew that it was out of place, but didn't make the type of fuss one would expect a wild animal to. Instead, it watched me warily, staying still and waiting for me to make my first. Staying still and waiting for me to make the first move. It would continue to wait. I had no intention of risking a pecking by trying to pick it up. Thankfully for us both, my tent flap opened and the bird from another world took the chance to escape with gusto. General Smarn cursed as he had to crouch to avoid the collision with it. Once the bird had taken to the sky, Smarn looked at me with an obvious question in his bright orange eyes. A crow with a message from the family member. A crow with a message from a family member, I explained before I could ask. I explained before he could ask. I shook a freshly unfolded missive that had been attached to the crow's left leg. The point of the missive wasn't actually communication. It was to lend cadence to my cover story. It was to lend credence to my cover story. After all, it would be suspicious to have random avian visitors for unknown reasons. Its contents were quite benign, and not the type of thing one would waste time on a reply to. And not the type of thing one would waste time on a reply to. "Hey, Crow," he asked, "your family uses demon spawn to send messengers. Talk about luxury." I cringed inwardly at the general's ignorance of the origin of crows. They may have been introduced to this plane of existence by the daemons, but it was not there that they originated. True daemon spawn must be crafted and cannot be bred and tamed like crows can. "What is it?" I demanded. What is it?" I demanded, neglecting to educate him. "The Northern Legion he struggled to remember their given name. "The Ultras," I reminded him. "Yes, sir. The Ultras have just... Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The Ultras..." "Good morning, Catbird. Hope you're doing well." "Yes, sir. The Ultras have at last joined us. They are formed up and waiting orders." "2 more legions to go then," I sighed. "Have them continue their training. In the commander's protest, I have them... If the commander's protest, have them flogged and brought before me." "Yes, sir." General Smarm bowed and left my tent. I watched the royal green flap close behind him, then turned my attention to the table that my helmet rested upon. Also upon the table was a well-detailed map that demonstrated my tactical prowess. Not that there was anyone in the camp who could even begin to appreciate it. The closest thing that they'd ever seen to a tactic was inadvertently flank an enemy when their rear lines couldn't get to the fight. Amused, I glanced at the missive that had been attached to the crow. "Dearest Karain, are you safe yet? Esmera. Sent from and signed by my youngest sister. That would be a trick. She's currently bound and gagged. To serve as food, of course. There truly is no blood quite as divine as one's own, but only the blood of others can nourish. As such, having family members is quite a boon." The other vampires were jealous of this, but then they were jealous of a great many things. My position, my manner, my power, and even my mission. To them, a half-breed like me, rising to such a station is abhorrent. To them, one such as I, rising so high, only serves to demonstrate how low they've fallen. To them, I'm merely an uppity tool, and I've no doubt that some of them plan to assassinate me when they get the chance. But even a half-breed like myself has defenses. It's not as if I asked for this honor, either. My mother was insane and desperately hated King Lofen. He had executed her father and forced her to marry his favorite noble. My father, on paper, was a duke and very well off. My mother's father was a count and barely qualified as nobility. Most women of the kingdom would have been honored, but my mother was furious. Not because she loved her father or hated the duke, but because she Not because she loved her father or hated the duke, but because she perceived the king's actions as slights against her. She openly admitted such to me, with pride in her voice. She had readily agreed to the vampire's plots when they approached her. They needed someone in the king's inner circle, and she was able to provide that. This lasted through the birth of my older brother, and then the plot evolved. They wanted a general who could conquer lands and help them They wanted a general who could conquer lands and help them secretly build an army. So she laid with an elven vampire that looked somewhat like my father. The result of the coitus was myself, a half-breed vampire, and my father was never any the wiser. When a vampire lays with another vampire, the resulting offspring is a vampire brood, a twisting-looking thing. A twisted-looking thing, similar in appearance to a common ghoul. It is much stronger than a ghoul, and just as smart, but it is much easier to kill than a true vampire. One needs simply to hack it up during the daylight, and the sun will do the rest. A brood's regeneration was much slower than even my own, which is already only about half as fast as a full vampire. When a vampire lies with a mortal, the result is an abomination like myself, the half-breed, as they call it. Half-breeds are more similar to true vampires than the brood are, but aren't as physically strong. We also age, which is damn near blasphemous to those who have lived for thousands of years. How can we truly be vampires if we are shackled by time like the cattle are? Regardless, my mother was more than happy to give birth to me for the chance at revenge. She made certain to take very good care of me and never let the wet nurse anywhere near me. She would jokingly tell the wet nurse that I was a biter, but it wasn't a joke. I needed blood every day at that stage, and every day she would whisper to me what my purpose in life was, as well as what would happen if anyone else found out about me. It gave me nightmares, but I kept it together. Better than she did, at any rate. On my 15th birthday, she snapped and murdered my father and older brother, stabbing them both repeatedly as they slept. The latter was convenient, as his assassination was forthcoming anyway. I inherited his share of the titles and lands, and the inbred bastard ordered me to execute my own mother to demonstrate my loyalty. She smiled at me as I took her head. The hardest part about it was resisting the blood smell. I immediately got rid of most of my newly acquired staff and replaced them with loyal servants who were in the know. The excuse I gave was that the prior staff was unable to prevent the assassination of my father or my brother, so I could not trust that they had not conspired with my mother. After that, they were grateful to leave the manor alive. My 2 younger sisters became my primary sources of sustenance. I love it when the mythology evolves. Always cool. And how they intertwine together and, plots and plans and stuff. Fighting's also cool. This became my primary sources of sustenance. Did you write this? I jokingly asked the covered cage in the corner of my tent. Not getting a reply, I walked over to the cage and kicked it. A small, muffled sound answered me. Esmira, my youngest sibling, bound and gagged with silk and kept very weak by regular feedings. I would feel sorry for her, were she not as vicious and vindictive as my mother. I remember my 12th birthday party, where she began to spread rumors that I had sexually assaulted a maid. My crime was that I had hidden her doll for a day, 6 months prior. For that, I was imprisoned and beaten severely by my father. When her actions were discovered, she grinned and admitted that she was joking around. Her punishment had simply been a scolding from father. Moon, my other sister, was much better behaved and quite well taken care of back in the manor. She still served as a source of sustenance when Esmera became nearly drained, but she was far more willing to part with her blood so that her older brother could conquer the world. Mother had taken her into our confidence early on in life. Moon detests Esmera, and it was her idea to put Esmera in a current situation to ensure that I had a source of blood. Truth be told, the blood isn't a requirement for survival anymore. It was when I was a child, about around the 8th birthday, I started to be able to survive on normal foods. That's one of the benefits to being a half-breed. It's much easier to pass as a mortal. However, doing so will lead to you being weaker than the average mortal, and all of the benefits to being a vampire will quickly diminish. I had to starve myself with blood for years to adequately demonstrate my weakness to King Lofen. The king was fully convinced that I was a pathetic worm by the time my predecessor, who had been old and frail when he'd become a Master General, died. The Master General must be weak and uninspiring, otherwise the people will follow them instead of the inbred bastard king. Lofen will likely order my execution if I'm successful with this invasion, but by then it'll be too late. The vampires will have a steady source of mortals to convert and plenty of room to create armies of their own. Lofen will find it much harder. Lofen will find it much harder to execute me now that I'm feeding again and have my abilities back. The regeneration comes in handy, but I have to be careful about who sees it happen. My ability to vanish has actually saved me from several assassins sent by rival nobles, and allowed me to satisfy certain curiosities that I had as a teenager. I've never had a reason to shapeshift into an animal, nor do I frequently partake in hypnosis. You would think that hypnosis would be useful, but it has a limited duration, and the mortal's personality drastically shifts during the process. Since it's nearly impossible to use covertly, it's only useful for preventing an imminent attack against oneself or making someone loopy enough to forget that you fed on them. Since I don't feed on strangers, it's only really useful for the former. But then, I have a sword for that sort of thing. There are other advantages to being a half-breed. Sunlight doesn't injure me at all, though most vampires are able to regenerate fast enough that it doesn't actually harm them. I'm also able to subsist on blood of other vampires, which is another reason my kind is looked down upon. Vampire blood is not nearly as potent as mortal blood, so this is barely even a benefit. The biggest drawback of being a half-breed is that I cannot make vampires of my own, nor can I create children with mortals to make more half-breeds. I can, however, breed with another vampire to create a brood. As such, a brood queen has been promised to me for my part in all of this. A vampire criminal whose mind has been completely destroyed. They slice off the top of the skull and replace a good deal of brain matter with metal so that the brain cannot fully regenerate. They incinerate the part of the brain that they have removed so that the vampire in question is trapped within their now useless vessel. Completely docile and useful for one thing only. It's a very secretive process, but I was privy to it when they showed me my reward. I'd been led down a long, darkened stone hallway into a dungeon that the vampires were currently occupying. I was led past laboratories, kennels, prison cells. I was led past laboratories, kennels, prison cells, and even their brood kings. There were far more brood kings than there were brood queens, which is likely an indication of the crime rate amongst the vampires. At last, I was shown my prize. I never learned her name, only her beauty. She had been a rather curvaceous elf before becoming a vampire. Long silver hair, alabaster skin free of any blemishes, and green eyes that didn't show even a glimmer of intellect. The lack of intellect is a bit of a turn-off, if I'm honest, but utterly necessary for her intended function. Her crime had been the murder of another vampire without just cause. Apparently, her victim had convinced her lover to part ways with her. She had tortured the victim first, cutting into her flesh for days before finally ending her eternity. A vicious streak a mile long, one that hopefully our brood would inherit. I sat down in my oak leather chair as I imagined the army of brood. I sat down in my oak leather chair as I imagined the army of brood she would sire for me. Perhaps I would use that army to capture more brood queens, and eventually I would subjugate the entirety of the continent. If I were to do that, I'd have to give a lot more thought to government structures. I will die of old age eventually, and I'll need to have a chain of succession if I'm to conquer the world. Yes, that would show these pompous bastards what a half-breed can do. I met my first vampire just after my mother's death. He had smiled scornfully as he informed me that my true father had been captured and destroyed by King Lofen's forces. He told me that scum like me should be honored to play the part that I'd been given, even as he educated me on my abilities and the drawbacks of my own form. He made it absolutely clear that he believed me to be nothing more than a mote of dust that would cause their greatest enemy to choke. I despised him. Every vampire within... Even the vampires with more agreeable personalities made it clear that they believed me to be trash, despite my necessity to their resurgence. Once that resurgence is complete, they will be unlikely to honor their part of the bargain. But I've taken measures against that particular betrayal. The Brood Queen will be mine. The Night Kingdom will be mine. The world will be mine. Sir, The General Smarm. The General Smarm once again opened the flap to my tent. What is it? The Symvolem have arrived. Excellent. Have them fall out and continue their training. If the commanders complain, well, you know what to do by now. I ordered. You know what to do. You know what to do by now. I ordered with a dismissive gesture, then grinned. One more. End of chapter. Oh, coffee. I'm not an addict. Well, maybe I'm an addict. Yeah, he is. Can't say that he was brought up in a good environment with a wholesome family and all that, so yeah, to be expected with that sort of backstory. Doesn't mean he doesn't deserve the steak. Yeah, I don't really feel it. I drink so much of it that... Not that I feel it, it's just I feel normal. I think it's a good way to put that. Good morning, Charles. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, fair enough. Not necessarily a bad thing. Anyways, on to the next chapter. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series, The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 30. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 7, Human American. It had been a few days since we left Kokena, and the trip had been smooth so far. Nash said that since it's just guarding the carts, we can do... Nash said that since it's just us guarding the carts, we can't do training. I'm thankful for that, but I think the real reason is because he doesn't want my level to surpass his. He'd been acting a little jealous of how quickly I'd been leveling up. Still, it's nice to be able to lay down, put my feet up on the side of the cart, relax and enjoy the ride without muscle aches. One side of the road was lined with a dense forest, and the other side was flat plain filled. And the other side was a flat plain filled with various wild grasses and flowers. In the morning, the sun rose over the plain, warming us up, and in the afternoon, the trees provided a nice little bit of shade to help us cool off. It was afternoon now, and I was so relaxed that I was about to drift off for a nap when a bump in the road sent me floating for a second. I came down hard, and Ares appeared to protect my head, while my armor did little to save my poor back. "Ah!" I groaned. "Sorry about that," Imlar said. "Yeah, not your fault, Imlar," Nash chuckled. Serves him right for lounging on the job. Oh, come on, I complained. You said that these paths are safe ones. Relatively safe, York said with a grin. As in, safer than the adventurer paths. It's still more than possible to run into complications out there. Like what? I asked. Monsters, for one, though they're a rare occurrence. Nash chimed in. Out here, the most common complication is banditry. Indeed, York agreed. They don't usually leave survivors either, unless they're hoping for a ransom, of course. What? Why not? Wouldn't that make the gods come after them? What? What? Why not? Wouldn't that make the gods come after them? Not guards, soldiers. Those soldiers won't deploy until there's a pattern of disappearances, or if there's a report of banditry. So by killing the survivors, they buy themselves some time and the chance to rob more people and go to the ground. Plus, if the survivors make it back to town, the soldiers will know where they're dealing with. Plus, if the soldiers make it back to town, the survivors make it back to town, the soldiers will know that if the survivors make it back to town, the soldiers will know what they're dealing with, and be better prepared to bring the bandits to justice. Justice, I trailed off, thinking of all the different brands of justice that were used during medieval. Justice, I trailed off, thinking of all the different brands of justice that were used during the medieval times. Back then, more often than not, justice meant death. If you put up a fight, they'd kill you during it. If you surrendered, they'd execute you, usually in pretty nasty ways. It was like all the leaders back then were competing for who could come up with the most disgusting way to end a human life. I don't really know where I stand on the death penalty. I'm sure some of them deserved what they got, but it's easy to take modern justice for granted. Yeah, justice, Nash repeated. Can't have them killing honest folk who just trying to make a living. Too few of them around as it is. Nash's stance on the matter caused the rest of us to fall silent in contemplation. I started running through what-if scenarios in my head to make sense of it all. Another bump in the road interrupted my musings, and I decided to adjust my seating arrangement to prevent further spinal trauma. The carts made their way along the road. The carts made their way along the road. The goods in the lead cart, making some metallic clanging noises whenever we hit another bump. It sounded somewhat like a silverware drawer, but if the silverware were extra large and heavy. I was nearly about to ask about the contents when Imlaw turned to us with a serious expression. Fire ahead, he said. Looks like trouble. We scrambled up into better positions to see what he was talking about. Further along the road was a cart, on fire and with two of its wheels broken apart. Scattered along the road, there was no sign of whatever had been pulling the cart or its owner. As we drew closer, that changed. Over the sound of our carts rolling along, there was a clamor coming from the woods along the side of the road. An arrow sailed from between the trees, and Imlaw stopped the cart in alarm. I glanced at Nash and Yook, who were already preparing to exit the cart. I drew my sword, and a small man ran out from the tree line. He was in a panic, and had a bit of rope tied around one of his wrists. His head turned to look at the flaming cart, and he stopped for a moment. He changed his mind about the pause as another arrow flew in his general direction, and he quickly turned and started running our way. He was so panicked that he ran a good 100 feet or so before he noticed us, all of us, Imlaw included, jumping from the cart and started jumping. Imlaw included, jumped from the cart and started running in his direction. No! The man shouted as he continued to run. Get back! I paused, but Yook and Nash continued to chase after Imlaw. A few tall orcs exited the tree line as Imlaw caught up to the man. I started to run again, as my brothers passed Imla to fight the other orcs. As I caught up to Imla, I got a good look at both the man and the orcs. The man was wearing fancy clothing, a blue tunic with shiny leather shoes and gold trim on everything. He looked a lot like a guy who was at the High Chief, but his face was different. The rope attached to one of his wrists had an empty loop, and his free hand was bleeding. The orcs looked tough, even by orc standards, covered with little more than pants and scars. They shouted a challenge at my brothers. There was little doubt regarding what was going on. These orcs were bandits, pursuing an escaped victim. Pursuing an escaped victim. These orcs looked tough, even by orc standards, covered a little more. These orcs were bandits, pursuing an escaped kidnapping victim. There was a loud pop as I passed Imla, and I heard the dwarf shout something from behind me. I turned to look and saw him laying flat on the ground, with Imla looking down at him with a confused expression. "What's going on?" I shouted. He turned around to say something, but a thunderous sound drowned him out. I felt the weight of Ares appear on my head, and a moment later I was lifted from my feet and sent sailing through the air. My vision went dark for a time, and when it returned my ears were ringing. I rolled onto my side and tried shaking my head to clear the sound. It didn't work. What the hell was that? An explosion? From where? I quickly looked around and saw Imla helping the dwarf to his feet. Both of them were covered in dust. But Imla had it all over. He must have been thrown just like me. I glanced at my brothers. Yuk was on the ground and Nash was bent over him. I tried to get up, but my arms felt like jelly. I collapsed back to the ground. Had to see if Yuk was okay. He's gonna be okay. If not, I'll... As I tried to get to my feet, I felt a hand on my shoulder and looked up to see Imla. He motioned something, but my ears were still ringing. I concentrated hard to hear him through the sharp, steady tone. It began to fade, and I was finally able to pick up what he was saying. Nick, are you okay? Can you get up?" he asked, his voice sounding very concerned. I managed to get to my knees and noticed that my right hand was bloody. As I raised it to look at it, my hand's shadow traveled a bit, and then I saw sunlight, but the ground... And then I saw... And I saw the sunlight hit the ground under my hand. Why can I see through my hand? What kind of optical illusion is that? I almost laughed. But then the pain set in. There's a hole in my hand. It's big enough to put my thumb through it. How did that happen? My shoulder hurt, too. Is there a hole there? Oh, God. My leg is killing me. It's still there, right? Of course it is. I'm sitting on them right now. Don't panic. Calm down. Deep breaths. This isn't so bad. Just wrap it up and Ten will take care of it. Yuk can help. Oh, God. Yuk. Are you all right? You're huh? Imla said. His tone cut right through my concerns like a red-hot meat cleaver through the room-temperature stick of butter. His tone... Huh? Imla. His tone cut right through my concerns like a red-hot meat cleaver through a room-temperature stick of butter. I focused on him with what seemed like a tunnel vision and noticed that he was holding the upper right side of his stomach. He pulled his hand away, and I noticed that the light brown dust was become there. And I noticed that the light brown dust had become darker, as if it were wet with something. We both seemed to notice the bright crimson blood on his hand at the same time. "Oh, I'm bleeding too," he said, then looked at me. Our eyes locked, and we stared at each other in shock for a full second, before I watched his eyes roll into his back of his... Before I watched his eyes roll back. Before I watched his eyes roll into the back of his head. He seemed to fall in slow motion, and I tried to catch him, but I was moving even slower. Everything hurt, but I pushed through the pain to stop his head from slamming into the ground. I grit my teeth through the sharp pain as his head connected with my injured hand. But the pain doesn't matter. He needs help. How can I help? What should I do? Yoke. Yoke, I shouted, looking around. Yoke's out cold, Nash shouted. Imlaw's been hurt. Bad. I heard a metallic clang and turned to look at Nash. He was fighting off 2 bandits who had somehow survived the explosion. He was using his 2 swords this time, 1 sword for each bandit. I noted that the remnants of the flaming cart were no longer intact. That must have been where the explosion came from. Feeling numb, I looked back at Imlaw. He was pale. Too pale. Hey, boy, someone said. I looked up and saw a dwarf. That's right. He was the one who told us to run and get back. Why didn't we listen? If we had, Imlaw would be okay. How do I fix this? This can't be happening. How do I make him okay? What do I do? Here, put this on this wound and push down, the dwarf said, handing me a bundle of cloth. He's out, so don't worry about hurting him. We've got to staunch the bleeding. The cloth was blue with gold trim. It looked familiar. I glanced at the dwarf and noticed that he was missing a sleeve. He'd ripped it off, and I was now holding it. I pushed the sleeve against the center of the bloodstain and pushed. Nick, a voice said in my head. Nick. Nick, a voice in my head said. I tried to reply, but my mind wasn't in working right. I tried to reply, but my mind wasn't working right. It feels like I'm swimming without my body. How do I help Imlaw? Is Yoke okay? Should I go help Nash against the bandits? I can't. You're adventurers, right? The dwarf asked. I nodded. Adventurers usually travel with a healer. Who's your healer? The bald orc in the robe over there, I gestured with my head. But he's hurt, too. The dwarf looked over my shoulder and got a nervous look on his face as he noticed Nash fighting 2 bandits at once. Nick, Imlaw's wound indicates that his liver has been struck with shrapnel. You need to check for an exit wound. How do I do that? I said aloud. Check his back for a similar wound. The dwarf gave me an odd look as I rolled Imlaw to check his back. I couldn't see, so I wiped my hand on a clean pot. So I wiped my hand on a clean part of my pants and swiped it across his back. He came back red. Blood. So much blood. He's bleeding in the front and back. How do I stop the bleeding? I can't push on both sides at once. He's got to die. He's going to die, and there's nothing I can do about it. Crap, the dwarf hissed. We need a healer, he said, as he was going to spend more time with his family. He said he was going to spend more time with his family, that he'd retire from the road after this job. This delivery would let him hire on employees to do the majority of the work for him, and he'd finally be able to see his wife and kids more. He'd stop being an absentee father, and his kids' lives would be the better for it. He's a good person. This isn't fair. Kid, the dwarf said gently, putting his hand on my shoulder. Why did this happen? Why did this happen? I don't understand, I said, dimly aware of the tears streaming down my face. My cart has a bunch of mining equipment in it, including explosives, the dwarf said quietly. Those arseholes decided that I'd make a good hostage, but my equipment wasn't worth their time, so they torched the cart. Imlaw's breathing was shallow. But, what can I do? Stitches wouldn't work. He'd need surgery to seal the internal bleeding. A tourniquet? How do you put a tourniquet on a stomach wound? Maybe if you cauterized the wound, but would that just make it worse? If only I could. I don't know if this will work or not, but try casting a healing spell. Imagine the wound healing. I don't know whether this will work or not, but try casting a healing spell. Imagine the wound healing. That's right. Magic. I felt myself snap back to reality as I spread out my fingers and imagined the wound closing. But that didn't work. My magic core wasn't primed. I took a few deep breaths, and while it was charging, I tried to imagine a liver with a hole in it, then imagining the hole closing and the liver being intact. I closed my eyes to get a better mental picture, Come on! Minor healing unlocked. Nay, Ronum to sack, my mouth moved. Nay, Ronum to sack, my mouth moved. I felt a tingle as the magic travelled from my chest, through my arm, and out my fingers. I willed it to continue pushing all the magic I could into it. I kept charging my magic with deep breaths, refilling my core and mixing the magics even as I was being drained. It somehow felt like sprinting. Is it working? Is it working? I asked Ten. I can't tell. The clotting is blocking our view of the wound. Lift it up and check. Not yet. I want to make sure. I kept the spell active until I felt the last spluttering of magic flow through my arm. My magic core was fully drained. I felt lightheaded, as I lifted his shirt to check his wound. I blinked my eyes heavily a few times as I looked upon his freshly mended skin. There was a slight red mark to indicate where the hole had been. His healed, the dwarf was surprised. You're a healer? I wasn't a minute ago, I panted, trying not to pass out. I blinked my eyes again and shook my head to stave off tunnel vision that was forming. Not working. Actually, come to think of it, what are you anyway? He asked. I managed to say before I passed out. End of chapter. Okay. Ooh-wee. Big stretch. All right. I think that's going to be me for the day. We've done a good chunk of work. It's not bad. Maybe not enough pauses in between the chapters to let my voice recuperate a little bit, but such is life. Tomorrow we'll do a bunch of TFOS. Maybe not. Maybe if there is enough time, we'll do some re-TFOS. And then we're fully a week ahead, in theory. In theory. Enough ahead so that I can get sick again. For those of you who don't know, I am cursed. Whenever I get more than a week ahead on recording, I get sick, I get injured, something happens where I use up any of the additional recording time. That's the way it is. Nothing I can do about it. But the year and a half of surgeries and recovery definitely left a mark on the channel, with the not being consistent enough for the algorithm. Because the algorithm likes being consistent all the time, until your death. Okay, so yeah, that's me for the day. I will be back tomorrow, which is Friday. Yes, tomorrow, and then Saturday, I'm taking off, and then I'll be back on Sunday. Okie dokie. Thank you all for joining me. It's much appreciated, especially in this time where everything is dragging your attention everywhere. It's much appreciated that you spend your attention here. This is the attention economy after all, so attention is worth attention. Anyways, have a great day, everyone.